From the castles of ancient heroes to pharaohs being discovered and more, here's some exciting archaeological discoveries. Number 8. King Arthur's Castle? Without a doubt, one of the most legendary tales ever told was that of King Arthur. From his ascension by Sword in the Stone to his assembling the Knights of the Round Table and more, the story has been told and retold for many generations. But one of the things that many people can't determine is whether or not the stories and the characters were real or not. There is some proof that Arthur Pendragon was potentially alive, but other elements have yet to be proven, including the finding of his legendary castle of Camelot. However, Professor Peter Field, who used to teach at the Bangor University, said although he loves doing this stuff, he had uncovered the location by luck. He said, "It was quite by chance. I was looking at some maps, and suddenly, all the ducks lined up. I believe I may have solved a 1,400-year-old mystery." According to him, the location of King Arthur's legendary Camelot is on the outskirts of Huddersfield, which ironically was a place that many wondered whether it could be the place where Camelot once stood. The Romans called the fort at Slack Camulodunum, which means the fort of the god Camel, and could be where the name Camelot comes from. The location is said to not just match up in terms of timing and placement, but in terms of defending the land. If there was a real King Arthur, he will have lived around AD 500, although the first mention of him in Camelot is in the French poem from the Champagne region of France from 1180. There is no mention of Camelot in the period between those dates, known as the Dark Ages, when the country was at war and very little was recorded. Whether this place is the real Camelot or the inspiration for Camelot, it's still very much up for debate. But for those who have loved the legend, it's something to hold on to and hope for. Number 7. The Mystery Stella. Egypt was home to many pharaohs, both male and female, but one of the most famous of all was that of Ramses II. He was not only well known, he was one of the longest reigning pharaohs in Egyptian history, making many curious when a stela was found during a dig that featured him making an offering to a god. The stela in question was found in 2018 at the ancient city of Tanis, now called San El Hagar. This site was already a boon for archaeological digs, but this stela tablet was something else entirely. For not only was it found perfectly upright, no one is able to decipher either the hieroglyphics that are on the tablet or the god that Ramses II is making an offering for. This wouldn't be the first time some mysterious images have appeared in stone, but having it happen with a well-known pharaoh? That's another matter. It's very much a conundrum, but one that many are very eager to solve, for it could shed even more light not just on Ramses II, but all of Egypt. Number 6. Dinosaur Footprint. The idea of dinosaurs leaving traces of themselves behind is nothing new. In fact, many archaeologists have found bones of dinosaurs throughout the centuries. But in terms of leaving footprints behind, that's a little bit more special, because given how the world changes, a simple footprint in the dirt would be hard to keep intact. That's a little more special, unless you're in the Daimler Peninsula in Australia's Kimberley region. For here, there isn't just one footprint of a dinosaur, there are several. In fact, there are so many that some people call this place Australia's Jurassic Park. But in 2017, the park grew in a big way, for a footprint of a sauropod was found, and it was massive, fitting the dinosaur that left it. In fact, the print itself was nearly 6 feet long, making it the biggest dinosaur footprint found in the world so far. Number 5. Hominids and Humans. Human evolution is a very important field of study, not the least of which is because it helps determine the origins and growth of our species. One of our forefathers, if you will, were the hominids. They have been studied by many for a long time, but a 2018 study reveals that in the Arabian Peninsula, they might have lasted for much longer than expected, which could mean that not only did they live there, they might have been living with the Arabian humans. How did they come to this discovery? They observed the tools that were found in Saudi Arabia that were from around 188,000 years ago. Early hominins had small brains and made crude tools, study lead researcher Eleanor Skiri noted. However, later hominins had bigger brains and were more sophisticated. Instead of crudely banging rocks together to produce sharp-edged stone flakes, they created beautiful, symmetrical artifacts called hand axes. According to them, they believed that this early hominins were following the rivers that used to live in this area and thus made it to the heart of Arabia, which is interesting as most felt that the more advanced humans lived alone in this area for a while before then, especially since that time period the deserts took over Arabia, showing these hominins were actually quite endurant. Though no proof that the Hominids and the early Arabian people mixed, it is a curious possibility given the artifacts found. Number 4. Rosetta Stone. This all happened near the town of Rosetta. A group of soldiers was fortifying a fort when they decided to take down a certain wall. As they did, Pierre-François Bouchard found a slab of stone that was unlike anything he'd seen before, mainly because this stone had numerous writings on it. This was how the Rosetta Stone was discovered. Knowing they had quite the finding on their hands, they researched it at length. The stone was dated to 2 BC, but just as important was the text in the slab wasn't one language, it was 3. Hieroglyphics, the symbols seen on the Egyptian tombs and pyramids, Demotic, another Egyptian language, and then there was Greek, something that many people were surprised to find on the slab. After Napoleon was defeated, the British got the slab, which led to Jean-François Champollion and Thomas Young examining and deciphering it all. Through the Greek part of the text, they were able to translate both sections of the Egyptian text. To be clear, this was a major breakthrough in the world of history. At the time, the hieroglyphics and Demotic languages were basically gibberish to those who weren't Egyptian, and even some Egyptians couldn't read them as it was a dead language of sorts. The Rosetta Stone changed all of that. We now know great chunks of Egyptian history because we're able to read the memories of the past. The impact of the Rosetta Stone can be felt to this day, and it's not only a cultural icon in and of itself, it's referenced many times to mean a way to translate something, which is exactly what it did. And the world should be grateful that a remnant found during a war led to a great deal of understanding about history. Number 3. The Lost City of Troy? The legendary story of the Iliad, written by Homer, depicted many things, but the main crux of the story was that of the Trojan War. This massive war between the people of Troy and the Greeks over the stealing of Helen by gods at the request of Paris is one of the most famous wars in all of literature, meaning many legendary warriors like Achilles and more. But the problem is that no one can determine if the war was real, let alone if the city of Troy was real, where the war took place for the most part. Many have debated back and forth as to whether it was real, so much so that when the city of Hizarlik was discovered on the coast of Turkey and declared to possibly be the lost city of Troy, no one was sure what to believe. There is some scientific proof to back this up, including many archaeological digs that seem to have found items dating back to the period of which the Trojan War was supposed to take place. And there's no doubt that people did live in Hizarlik. In fact, over the course of history, 13 different cities were said to have lived on the grounds, each of whom built their realm on top of the remains of others. The debate goes on whether this is actually Troy, but the history of this piece of land is very certain. Number 2. The Dead Sea Scrolls. In 1947, one of the most important religious documents of all time was found by complete accident. This is the tale of the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls were found near the city of Jericho. A group of teenagers were looking over a group of goats when suddenly one got lost. The teenagers then went to go find the goat. As they did, they found a cave, and wondering if the goat was in there, one of the teenagers threw a rock into it, and he broke a pot. Upon hearing this, he went into the cave and found several more pots, and within them were papyrus scrolls. Scrolls that were in fact some of the earliest known pieces of the Bible. Numerous chapters were within the scrolls, and each of them were a piece of history. The true irony, though, was that the teenagers weren't exactly sure about the value of this find, so they went into the town and sold it for what they could. But then they were tested and found to be very real and very old. A massive search for more of these scrolls was started. By the end, they had found thousands of papyrus scrolls, from scrapes to full text of Bible. This accidental find is considered one of the greatest finds in history, and today, the Dead Sea Scrolls have been shown off in many countries around the world. Number 1. King Tut's Tomb. The history of Egypt has always been something that fascinated many, but the one that started the craze for Egyptian artifacts was the finding of King Tut's tomb. King Tutankhamun was crowned as Pharaoh of Egypt when he was only 9 years old, and he died barely an adult at the age of 17 or 18. His death and burial commenced, and that should have been the end of his story, when instead it was just delayed a little bit. In the year 1922, archaeologists found the tomb and were amazed by all the treasures that lay within it. There were tributes to the pharaoh, animal sculptures carved out of gold, and more. But here's the catch. The tomb wasn't that big, and there were telltale signs that something had gone very wrong in the burial process, including the fact that Tut himself seemed to have been caught on fire at some point. Not to mention, the room that he was in was much smaller and less lavish than any other previous pharaoh before him, despite him having an importance to the Egyptian people. To try and protect the history and the relics, the team who found it claimed that any who dared touch the gold and take it from the tomb would suffer a curse. Some people have actually died after going into the tomb, so this has led many to feel that the curse is real. The curse of King Tut is something that is still talked about today, despite the team openly admitting after a period of time that the curse was their creation. The importance of the find of King Tut's tomb started a mad rush of sorts to Egypt to find more sacred tombs and burial sites. In the decades since, many more hidden treasures have been indeed found, leading to more insight into the long history of Egypt. Many more treasures are likely left to be found in the sands of the country. Thanks for watching. What did you think of these exciting and incredible archaeological discoveries? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!